Hey everybody, this is Kevin with nursingcamp.com, and I'm going to go over an exercise that I do with my students, especially as they're preparing for the NCLEX. It's called the symptomology exercise, where we explore the symptomology that we see in questions and that we'll see in practice. So let's get into it. Hi everybody, this is Kevin with nursingcamp.com, and this is my lecture on mastering nursing school, and an assignment that I do in my class that really helps students look at medications and prepare for the NCLEX. And one of the things about the medications and what this is it's the top 200 medications that are most prescribed, so therefore they're most likely to show up on the NCLEX. So let's get into it. So previously I talked about my previous exercise of symptomology, and the reason that we do symptomology is because of NCLEX questions are going to have symptoms in it, and also test questions will have symptoms in it. So you have to be aware of all the symptoms, and really there's only so many symptoms that you can put into a question. So therefore it's important to know them. So therefore that exercise is all about symptomology and looking at it. Now, the next thing I did was I looked at medications, and what I started to notice was that over time, when you're looking at the NCLEX and questions and all that, you start to say to yourself, this is interesting, because if they're going to test about medications, they're going to test about what's most prescribed. And this list is not my list. It comes from the pharmaceutical companies of the United States and Canada that basically says that these are the top 200 medications that are most prescribed. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Now, all my assignments tend to be very purposeful, not things of busy work. Though it's a lot of work, it's very important to do because it's going to prepare you for the NCLEX and also for school and what you know and what you don't know. That's all the part of understanding about, isolating the content to recognize whether or not you know the content or you don't know the content. Well, this top 200 medications is going to really understand whether or not you know these medications. Now, here's a funny thing about this. When you're taking the NCLEX, and you hear this all the time, there's medications on there, you're like, I never even heard about it. Now, what I find out is that the reason this happens is that a lot of times in nursing school, you have teachers that aren't in practice, but they're in the book or they have been out of practice. So they teach what they think they know, right? Or they teach just what they see, right? Or what they remember. And so a lot of times medications get prescribed all the time. And unless you're actively studying and staying up on your practice, you're going to not teach them in class. The next thing you know, the students will not get those because they don't talk about them. And that's why it's so important to be looking at a list like this, because a lot of times these medications show up and it's like, what the hell is that medication? I never saw that. And that's important. So when we're looking at this assignment, that's what we want to take, So even when I looked at this, I looked at this, I'm like, I don't know what that medication is. Never even saw that. And so it's very important to see it and to recognize it. Now, the second thing is you have to know generics. And the reason you have to know generics is because NCLEX is going to be generics. And the reason it's going to be generics is because Canada does the same NCLEX. So you're going to be taking the same test as they're taking, and they only have generics up there. Okay, now that's different than practice. And you'll have teachers say, no, I want you to know both of them. I only teach generics. And the reason I only teach generics is because of you have to pass your NCLEX and you have to pass. That's the major priority. So get these medications known and what they are. All right. So let's get into the sheet and what is it. All right, so there's an acuity level. All right, so that's over here. And that acuity level is 3 different levels, 1, 2, and 3. All right, and the rule is that level 1 medications are acute medications. Right? So if you're looking at it, think about something you call up the doctor for in the middle of the night. That's an acute med. Right? Also medications that you might hold if the parameter is off, right? So like metoprolol over here, I see, right? So, if the heart rate is less than 60, I hold it. If the systolic blood pressure is less than 90, I hold it, right? So that makes an acute medication. It requires further assessment. Generally, if I'm given this medication, if it shows up in a question, that makes it acute. All right, and then it falls under the basic things that we're going to do. Now, level 2 medications, you may assess. May require monitoring, looking at blood levels, perform assessment before or after medication. Okay, perfect example of that would be Coumadin. Right? So Coumadin requires a PT-INR check before you give it. Right? So if you're going to give it and you didn't check your PT-INR and they were bleeding and you gave it, you caused the problem. So therefore, that's why it requires assessment. And that's level 2. And level 3 is generally education. Right? So usually chronic medications and different things like that. Like statins, right? So simvastatin or something like that. Anti-cholesterol medication. Well, you teach them about don't eat killer grapefruit, citrus, and all that stuff, right? All about teaching. We assess liver enzymes when they first start it, but once they're on it, you know what I mean, you just teach them not to eat grapefruit juice and all those grapefruits and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get into the list. Now this list is 200 meds, so it's an awful lot. It's a good exercise to isolate what you know and what you don't know. If you don't recognize the medication, you'll put a negative next to it, right? But if you're pretty good with it, you should be able to fill out these 3 areas. So the first thing we're going to look at is levothyroxine and what kind of class is it. That's what you want to figure out. And then when we talk about classes, we're talking like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, those type of things. Right? And also, what's the organ that it's affected, right? So like beta blockers affect the heart, you know, levothyroxine is a thyroid meds, right? So parathyroid, thyroid med, right? And then what is the level? All this is to basically isolate the content and then go from there. And then what we do from this is later on, you see these little asterisks in here. So these are the most likely. And then what I say from this, and usually with my students, we do A-Whales and we do a presentation on that. And if you haven't seen my A-Whales video, please see that. And it really covers what that means and how we look at medications and stuff like that. But this is a quick exercise. It goes through the 200 meds. It really isolates what you know and what you don't know. And then you go to the next thing. Do you know the class? Do you know the organ? And that's most likely. And then what the level would be, 1, 2, or 3. And then you go through it. Now, this is like a burn list right here. It's all the medications of the top 200. Now, the big question is that are these the ones that are being taught in school? And that's where the NCLEX shows up. My name is Kevin, and this is Nursing Camp, and this is the exercise on the top 200 medications that most likely are tested on the NCLEX and in nursing school. So see me on my next video on Mastering Nursing School and the NCLEX, where I'll talk more about other assignments I do in my class. So see you next time, Nurse On.